Well, it's the post-storm analysis and look ahead to the upcoming week. We'll do a little bit of long range. So we're going to get started because it's been a long weekend and we want it to end. And here we go on tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. And you can support the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. If you shop on Amazon, use our referral link on the description of this podcast to do your Amazon shopping, and Amazon will throw us back a little bit of coin for sending you there. It's an easy, simple, quick way. Doesn't cost you an extra cent out of your own pocket, and it keeps the live Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast commercial free. And we appreciate very much those of you who have done that. And Tempest by Weather Flow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system. Join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link for this is on the descriptor to this podcast, and you can also find the link at the top of the chat board. There is a coupon code, Autumn 2025, which I've been trying to change, but I can't change it, so we're stuck with it for a while. But if you go to the website via our referral link, and in case you forget, you can use the holiday gift code that Tempest has, and that'll work just as well. And if you do either one, you'll get 10% off. So it is me, just me here tonight. I kind of move the camera a little bit because I'm working two monitors when I'm doing the show. So sometimes I'm facing straight ahead, sometimes I'm facing in the direction I'm facing now. So I thought maybe this might make it a little more pleasant, which is a good thing. Welcome tonight to everybody on the chat board. Welcome to those of you who are watching in the background on tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. We're here Sunday through Thursday at 7:35. Normally we would start at 7:35 tonight, but wanted to move it up. It started at 7, so I can go to bed early. So subscribe to my YouTube channel, turn your notifications on so you don't miss us. And of course, if you like the show, hit the like button. Joe Rayo had some family issues to take care of today. He may still make it. If he does, we'll let him in. Also, Dave Tolerus may jump on if he can get away, but that's not a guarantee. So I may wind up doing this show all by my lonesome. So let's get started because there was a few interesting things here. I want to start off with the accumulations that occurred, and what's interesting to me is this the way this whole thing played out. The temperatures at low levels were warmer for longer, which impacted areas around the large urban areas, the big urban cities, New York City and Philadelphia. Now, these are the snow amounts in and around New York City. Now, you're you're going to be somewhat surprised or maybe you won't be surprised. But if you look at the numbers, and this is due, this was due primarily to the heat island effect. Dave Tolerus and I had a long conversation early this afternoon about this. Uh, New York City Central Park only measured 2.7 inches of snow, and just about a mile north of there, which would probably be somewhere on the Upper West Side, it was 3.1. And if you look at the numbers, for example, in Northwest Queens, mostly 3 to maybe 4 inches. In Brooklyn, 4-ish inches. But then once you cross the Queens line into Nassau, actually, if you just got out to easternmost Queens, you started to get into 5 and 6 inch amounts. And then you get into Long Island, particularly northern Suffolk County, where we're looking at final totals of 6 to 8 inches, and even some 6 to 7.5 inch amounts, and even some 8 inch amounts along the South Shore in Nassau and in Suffolk County. So that was the heat island effect around New York. Moving through New Jersey, another surprise is that the numbers in Northwest Jersey were pretty high. I thought this area I thought would get cut off to some extent, but that didn't happen either because it snowed for longer. So as a result, we saw 5, 6, and 7 inch amounts in the Northwest counties. In the Hudson Valley, you had mostly 3 and 4 inch amounts in areas of Putnam County, southern Dutchess County. See Putnam Valley here, 3.9 inches. And then you had, once you go north of Route 84, that's when the numbers really dropped off to about an inch or two. In Connecticut, 3 inches just north of Route 15, some 4 and 5 inch amounts south of I-95, I'm sorry, south of Route 15 down to I-95 near the coast. And then the further north you went into Connecticut, the numbers started to really tail off to 2 inches or even less than that. And, going back to the whole concept of the heat island effect, New Jersey did really well with this. We even had a 9.7, which if I that's near Freehold, New Jersey, 8.6 in west northwest of Jackson, New Jersey. Toms River 8.1, Whiting, New Jersey 8.2, and then Southwest New Jersey, all of 5 to 6 inch amounts. The numbers tailed off in southernmost New Jersey, where we saw under 3 inches, and down in Cape May it was just 1.3. But the same thing happened, by the way, around Philadelphia, where snow amounts were generally in the 3 to 4 inch range, and then you just go outside of Philadelphia to the west, and you're looking at 7 and 8 inch snow amounts. So to me, this was a pretty very interesting phenomena that occurred with this. I'm going to be curious as to what Joe Rayo has to say because he talks about the New York City 3 inch rule, which only works for Central Park in New York City. It doesn't work for any place else. But that if there's less than 3 inches of snow in the month of December, then it's a high probability that it'll be a below normal winter snow wise. But in a case like this, where we are talking areas literally within miles of New York City getting double and even triple the amount of snow, it makes you wonder whether um, that rule will work or not. I'm just going to throw it at him when if he doesn't come on tonight, we can certainly talk about this for tomorrow. So all the warnings are down, all the advisories are down. We have some winter weather advisories up in parts of central and extreme central. Well, I don't know if you want to call that central PA or western PA. I think that's under the jurisdiction of State College in central PA, so we'll call it that. Winter weather advisories. We have winter storm warnings in Garrett County in western Maryland, and we also have uh, uh, extreme cold warnings that are up for the mountains of West Virginia. And I took a look here at some of the observations and the wind. Their temperatures are down at right now near zero. And of course, the elevation is going to have something to do with that. But also, they're getting some really strong wind gusts and wind chills running at about 25 degrees below zero or lower. So that's why that's up. We have lake effect snow warnings in north central New York, lake effect snow warnings in southwestern New York and northwestern PA. And either side of those, flanking those, we have winter weather advisories. The light blue that you see across the Ohio and Tennessee Valley and down into the deep south and southeast, that's a cold weather advisory advising people that it's cold. And I can confirm that because right now at my house here in North Georgia, in the North Georgia mountains, it is 24. And it's been a very cold day indeed. I do not think we got out of the 30s today. And on top of that, we had a screaming wind. Although when the sun was out, you were out in with the sun, it actually didn't feel too bad at all. Um, in the Northwest, we've got various high wind watches and warnings. We also have flash flood watches again for much of Washington state and the northern part of Idaho. They've been dealing with uh, uh, this atmospheric river, this jet stream, long jet stream pattern that is been bringing tons of moisture into the Northwest, and you can see it there. There's actually another swirl that's off the West Coast, bringing another surge of precipitation there. Our storm system in the east, the wave of low pressure is southeast of Cape Cod and moving along. And now we've gotten into this dry, cold air mass that's going to be with us through Tuesday. So there'll be little or no melting going on. Nice weather, sunshine wise, across the south. Skies are mostly clear this evening across the south, but it is cold, and some of that cold air is also seeped down into Florida. And we have quiet weather conditions going on in the southwest. We still have a little bit of snow left going on around Cape Cod and in southeastern Massachusetts. It looks like a little band of moderate snows over Cape Cod. The radars are basically quiet along the rest of the coastal plain. some lake effect snow bands have moved south of Syracuse and are heading toward the northwestern Catskills. Whether they survive or not remains to be seen. Got a little bit of activity in terms of some areas of snow around the northern Great Lakes, and at the moment, a surge of rain into the Pacific Northwest. Otherwise, the radars across the rest of the country are very, very quiet at the moment. And here's the forecast for the next 7 days as far as precipitation is concerned. And I can tell you that the next round of precipitation at the end of the week is going to be rain, and it's going to be rain that will probably get well up into New England. For those of you who like snow cover and like things that are picturesque, certainly look pretty beautiful from some of the pictures I saw that were sent to me. That'll last a few days, and then by the end of the week, it will probably all be washed away, and it will be a memory. But we're looking at a half to three quarters, higher amounts as you go north. Some of this is snow in north central New York. In the Ohio Valley, we're looking at a half to three quarters of an inch with a few pockets a little bit higher. Not a whole lot along the Gulf states, quarter of an inch or less. And then take a look in the Northwest. From Northern California all the way up the coast and into Canada, we're looking at a very large area of 7 to 10 inches of rain, and in some parts of Washington state, 10 or more inches of rain. And that's on top of what's fallen in the last week. So this is going to continue there as moisture just continues to pour into the Pacific Northwest. Here's the GFS. Actually, I want to use the European. The GFS with this particular event was awful until yesterday. Until yesterday, when it finally started to catch up with the other models, which were showing a much more robust system with what we just went through. And the overall pattern starts with this trough that's along the East Coast. Now that lifts out, and you'll notice across Canada, we have basically strong westerly winds. So the northwest flow is going to disappear for a little while. However, at the same time, the models have really backed off on this idea of big ridging building up into the eastern part of the United States. We do have a west to east flow. It does mean that temperatures will moderate this week. By the time we get to Thursday and Friday, actually even on Wednesday, we'll probably see temperatures going a little above normal on Wednesday, and then more above normal for Thursday and Friday. But here we go with the next trough that's going to move into the eastern states and swing through at the end of the week. And that's going to be a rain event, as I said, given that if you follow the flow in the upper atmosphere, this kind of a setup uh, keeps cold air mostly in Canada and maybe right along the immediate border. So until the the Canadian flow gets somewhat reestablished, at least for this week. Once this cold shot that we have now gets out of the way, we're going to wind up warming up. And then we'll probably chill down a bit afterward, where the pattern gets a little more transitory. So we do see troughs coming into the east. So every time one does go by, here's one for Sunday the 21st into Monday the 22nd, we get a cold shot of air behind it. It sort of normalizes the atmosphere as it goes by, and then it lifts out, and then we go back to this sort of westerly flow. But we're kind of on the edge of that northwest flow next week through Christmas Day and beyond. And after that, the European wants to kind of build a little bit of a ridge there over Florida. It's on the flattish side, but this would be a warm west to east flow across the country for um, the days around and maybe after Christmas. Uh, Beyond that, it's hard to say. I am a little distressed for winter weather lovers. You don't want to see troughing running from Alaska down the west coast. It's there on the long range, but this is also the kind of thing where it's probably not going to be there on the next run because yesterday it had a deep trough in the east and a ridge in the west, and then so that's kind of switched back and forth. I think a lot depends on what's going on in the Pacific with respect to the Mad and Julian oscillation staying in a cold phase or whether it goes a little more neutral. We'll have to see. And the GFS in the long range uh, tries to drop the trough off the west coast, which sort of again keeps us on the edge, but we still wind up getting moderation. And then toward the end of the forecast period, you start to get back into some colder air. So it's a little dicey. Interesting that we do have higher than normal pressures from Greenland to Iceland and points east. So that might be a bigger player. I would suspect that you're going to see the upper air evolve over the next week or so. Don't put a whole lot of confidence in whatever you see in terms of the broader pattern beyond this coming week. Because I think the models are in this sort of transitionary period where they're trying to figure out all the changes in the Pacific and how that's going to eventually play itself out across the Pacific and across the United States. So here's our surface map. Our storm, of course, gone. Cold air in tonight, tomorrow, still lingering on Tuesday, but the high is going into the southeast and then off the coast. We get a more southwest flow beginning late Tuesday and particularly on Wednesday, and that should allow temperatures to warm all up and down the coast. A little front goes by in New England. You see it there on Wednesday across Maine and New Hampshire. But then we have that some of that Pacific energy coming in. And you see that low moving eastward, a 974 low north of Montana that drops into North Dakota and goes into the western lakes. This is going to have a trailing cold front, and the European and the GFS are both bullish, bringing in some Gulf inflow. So we have showers and probably thunderstorms here, which is, for folks in Indiana, Illinois, and Ohio, because they've had quite a bit of snow over the last several weeks. Now they might be dealing with rain and thunderstorms, so that would be quite the switch. But there you have it. The Europeans pretty bullish. This is Thursday night, so arguably it could be dry here through Thursday, and then we get into some rain and maybe even the chance that there could be a thunderstorm if that's a strong enough front. It does appear that it could be. Deep low between Lake Superior and James Bay goes well up to our north. We get a shot of colder air coming in for next weekend. Doesn't stay all that long. Another cold front due on Sunday with another shot of colder air behind that to start Christmas week, Monday the 22nd. And, for Christmas, does it's hard to say. I mean, it doesn't look like any big deal here. We're kind of on the borderline. Now, the European wants to have a diver in this northwest flow. I think that's the one thing you probably have to be careful of. If the models are correct with this idea that we're going to be sort of on the edge of this northwest flow, there could always, and all this Pacific energy is coming in, you might get some renegade energy that runs eastward and tries to go southeast, which is what the European is showing here for Christmas Day. And then I'm thinking maybe on the next run it'll probably look somewhat different. But this would probably be the only way that we could wind up with another chance for some snow if somehow, because we'll be on the edge of some colder air, that sets up in Canada and you get something in the northwest flow that dives southeastward and takes just the right track, and there's just the right amount of cold air to produce something around Christmas Day. That's a long shot. That's the only way it happens. There's another weakish system around the 28th on the European, and then that goes out. Expect again. We look at this tomorrow. I'm sure there are going to be a lot of differences. So that pretty much. I mean, I covered everything weather-wise. I can show you what the weeklies are doing in terms of the temperature anomalies. And if we go to, so this would be this coming week. It's skewed below normal because we're well below normal for the start of the week, which this goes from Monday to Monday. So we're well below normal Monday and Tuesday. Then we go above as we get to Thursday and Friday. Thursday will probably be the warmest day. Maybe Friday too. Could be just as warm. And then it gets colder again Saturday, Sunday. So when you average it out over the 7 days, it's slightly below normal in the eastern part of the United States. Then the second week, which would be the 22nd through the 29th, we're on the edge of below normal here for temperatures. From New York City north and east, it's below normal. From Virginia south and west, it's above normal. So there's a boundary zone right in between that. So there's your boundary in that white area. That's where you could potentially would see maybe a frontal boundary of some sort and a wave of low pressure. And then as we move into January, normal to below normal in New England, above normal from Virginia south. The week of the 5th through the 12th, it has much of the east above normal. Then we go to the 12th to the 19th, and it goes back the other way. In fact, the near normal goes all the way down into North Carolina. And from the 19th to the 26th, again, mostly near normal from the northern plains, the Great Lakes, the Ohio Valley, the northern mid Atlantic, and on up into New England. So I would just say that if you're a snow lover, you can't be unhappy with something like this because that's how you get systems like we got yesterday in a stretch where um, you're colder than normal or near normal, but you're not really deep into the cold, dry air. On the other hand, you're not seeing you're not seeing the long range pointing to any kind of big ridging. It's more of a gentle, it's sort of a gentler west northwest flow across the U.S. and across Canada. So, and the European uh, at least has done a far better job lately than some of the other models. And that was what was the other thing that was really interesting with what we saw over the weekend is that uh, as we got closer to the event, the models were getting more and more robust, not by a lot, but as each run went by, it would add an extra half of, 5 hundredths, an extra tenth of an inch here, 5 hundredths there. So it wound up, and then uh, things in the atmosphere generally slowed down. So the snow took a little longer to get out this morning. Probably hung around for an extra 3 or 4 hours, and in some places that made a big difference in terms of the snow amounts. And some areas picked up most of their snow this morning. Like for example, Long Island, the bulk of the snow fell after 7 a.m and at an inch an hour in some places, or even more. And also in coastal New Jersey, which with many areas getting 4 and 5 inches up and down. Well, at least two-thirds of the Jersey coast managed to get some 4 and 5 inch amounts, and I'm talking about the immediate coast. So, I think overall, in terms of the forecast, it could have been better. Certainly, from my end, I was I was too low. I wasn't as low as some people, but I was too low, not high enough. Dave Tolerous, I got to hand it to him because he went with the general area of 4 to 8 inches, and except for those heat island issues, he pretty well nailed it. Did a really good job. And Joe Rayo did good with the Hudson Valley. He really didn't extend his arm far enough south to judge to judge too harshly. But at least for where he was in the Hudson Valley, a general 2 to 4 inch snowfall kind of panned out that way. So this was the other thing I found very interesting about everything that went on this week and last week. The two mid-Atlantic systems that impacted Virginia in a big way. I mean, they had more snow. The two December snowfalls in Virginia this year have been were substantial and something you rarely see one, let alone two, within 4 days of each other. But what's interesting to me is that those two systems and this particular one outperformed. They were situations where, as we watched the models move along, they got more and more bullish as the time frame grew shorter and shorter. One of the other issues that also came up too, which I never really thought about this, but Dave and I were discussing this also this morning, was the fact that this snow happening on a Saturday during the Christmas holiday shopping season. Okay, so what are most people doing on the weekends at this time of year? They're out shopping. They're out doing things. So they may have gotten their only weather forecast of the day in the earlier part of the day when nothing was really, when numbers were nudged up, but not nudged, not pushed up enough. So they left with lower numbers in their mind. And, it's a Saturday night. I mean, how many people really pay attention to news and weather on a Saturday night? Not many. I know from doing YouTube that doing shows on Fridays and Saturday nights, you don't get big audiences because people are out. So um, there's a there was some perception by some people, mostly people that like to either bust chops or just feel like they have to express their opinion, even though it's not invited, that the forecasts were all a big bust. Well, I would take some exception to that. I mean, certainly they could have been better, and certainly the numbers could have been higher. But if you were paying attention yesterday, and certainly if you were watching our show, we talked about the fact that there was going to be. I mean, I specifically said use the word jackpot zone. That there were going to be jackpot zones and a few bust areas. I just didn't anticipate that. My numbers were too low. I had a 3 inch plus band, an area of 3+ inches, thinking on my mind it could be 3 to 5 or so, and then and also specifically pointing out that amounts could be locally higher in some places. It just that amounts were locally higher in more than just some places. So you learn. That's one of the things that I discovered very early in this particular business that your forecasts are never going to be 100% perfect, especially when it comes to snow. And people are touchy about that because it is a high impact type weather event. Keeps people off the roads. They can't, get to wherever they're going or do whatever they're supposed to do. And that includes even going to work. So I get that. But uh, it was just one of those odd things, and it does still happen. As much as good as forecasts have gotten over the years, these sorts of things um, happen. So Tom CC 19524. I don't view it as a bust. Both you and Rayo mentioned locally higher. I know, but you know what, Tom? What happens is that people don't listen. So if I said 3 to 5, I kind of said yesterday I would have if I had redone my map last night. I didn't have time. I would have made the 3 inch line a 4 inch line, so it would be 4 more inches and with locally higher amounts. But people don't. First of all, not everybody. They should, but not everybody watches the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast, which is here Sunday through Thursday at 7:35 p.m. But most people don't pay attention, and particularly on a Saturday during the holiday season when they shut the TV off and they're out doing stuff. When numbers were raised, they didn't hear about it, so that's what happens. Although they have their phones, so I don't really get it. Joseph Carr, thank you for hitting the tip jar tonight. Really appreciate it very much. Thank you. And I know some of you putting up kind words about the work we did yesterday. Uh, Thank you much. And I did, and as I point out, Tom, yes, the North, you got to think that those numbers that we saw, the where the numbers in and around New York City were 50% lower than actually in some cases even more than 50, maybe they were half or even a quarter of what occurred in areas just to the east and northeast and beyond. That had to be the heat island. Plus, if you looked at the way, one of the things that happened last night was, and I noticed that uh, with the system being maybe a little bit more robust, it sort of delayed the low level cold air. It was cold enough aloft. That was not an issue. It was cold enough aloft, but at the low levels where temperatures had gotten into the 40s during the day, they kind of settled around the freezing mark, 32, 33. I thought they would have dropped into the 20s, certainly by, say, 5 or 6 a.m. They did eventually drop into the 20s, but they didn't do it until after 7 or 8 o'clock. So you wound up with a situation where the just outside the urban areas are so much colder. And I can attest to this because I can remember many times when I was working at WPIX, and my shift would end I'd be out the door at 11 o'clock p.m. and driving home. And I can remember a couple of snow events, and it's the sort of thing that you might see late in the winter season, say in late February or March, where it was snowing in Manhattan, but it wasn't sticking anywhere. Okay, and then I drove to out. I remember one in particular, one where I drove out of the Midtown Tunnel, and you could see there was like some slushy accumulation on the side roads and on the side of the highway, near the rails, but there wasn't much. But once I got to Eastern Queens, like once I got past the Clearview Expressway, all of a sudden you saw more snow accumulated. And then once I crossed the Cross Island Parkway, where you're sort of staring into Nassau County, and there you can already see there's a lot of trees and no buildings. Everything was white and snow covered, including the roads. So that was a great example of heat island. And if I remember that correctly, I think maybe there was an inch or two in New York City, and I think out where I was on Long Island, where I lived, there was like 7 or 8 inches by the time that system was all said and done. So uh, heat island was definitely a a factor yesterday, and again an interesting interesting phenomena. Um, I'm sorry. Whose comment? Steve Lapointe. I'm sorry because I'm scrolling backwards here. Whose comment should I take as a good thing because he's the number one forecast shopper? I mean, are you talking about Tom? I'm not sure. Um, everybody knows my opinion about forecast shopping, and it's really distressing that people do that because it causes uh, it causes folks to make bad decisions with regards to this. I talked to someone today, for example, that made a decision based on the fact that he watched a certain channel at 2 o'clock in the morning that came on and said 1 to 2 inches was going to be the total accumulation. So he made decisions based on that after having seen and heard from other forecasters and other professionals. So he went with that, and it was the wrong decision, and it wound up creating issues with regards to how he was going to handle his workday. But this is why um, if you're if weather's an important thing and you pay a professional to give you an opinion, you know, it's not a good thing. Um, it's not a good thing to second guess them by going to 5 or 6 other sources and finding out what they're saying, because it all it does is it leads to it leads to trouble. So the chairman Scott Briller sent me this. He said in the last 30 years, New York City has received above that total 8 times. Um, okay, so he's looking at why is there a screenshot of me? Uh, I'm not sure what you mean by above that total. Which total are we talking about? So in the last 30 years, New York City received above that total 8 times in December. La Nina years, I can't see it because it's blocked out. 2000, 2005, 8, 10. I'm assuming 11, 17, and 20. So all of those were above normal years. So if 2.7 is the number, then uh, if 2.7 is the number, then that's what Mr. Briller has posted. So if you're a snow lover, you're liking that. You're liking that. And Scott had 7 inches in the Trenton area, so they did rather well. All right, I think it seems that Joe's not going to make it tonight, clearly because he hasn't yet, and Dave couldn't make it either. So I think what I'm going to do is wrap it up here and let you know or remind you that we're going to be here tomorrow night at our usual time, 7:35 p.m. So do tune in and have a great night. Stay safe, stay warm, and we'll see you. We'll see you all tomorrow. Nighty night.